My first question was, you said a little bit earlier, we were talking about the funding of the public education in this state. You said 40 cents, I think was what you said, of every dollar goes to public education in this state. So maybe you're arguing, obviously, the funding is not the problem. What do you believe is the problem of our education system? Because today we're looking at overcrowded schools. Even in the 43rd District, we're looking at a scarce amount of resources, and we're looking at scores and testing among the worst in the country. So what do you believe is the problem, if it's not a funding problem? And also, the second part of my question is, how is your feel on charter schools? You said earlier that, we're micromanaging our schools. Maybe charter schools would give them some more freedom. Do you think charter schools is a step toward in the right direction to helping our education system?
Great. Thank you for that question. Let me be clear what I said earlier. It wasn't the adequate funding of education. I spoke about how a dollar of every state budget is restricted already, and education was the big component of it, then the pensions, then the bonds. So I merely spoke about how much of each dollar is impacted and how little is left over for all the discretionary cuts that people are talking about. Having said that, we have a mechanism for funding education. We have 6.1 million students in the state of California from grades K through 12. And if you take a look at our Prop 98 funding, and I just received a legislative report that spoke to nearly over $10,000 per student of funding available. But I'll tell you, in Glendale, I think their funding is a little bit over $4,800 per student per year, and Burbank is about $4,900 per student per year. I want to ask the question, if they're getting funding in excess of $10,000 per student, where's the in-between going? Who is keeping the balance of the money? That's about $5,100 to $6,100 of funding. So we need to find out where those inefficiencies are. In school funding, we elect a superintendent of education, and yet the governor has a Department of Education secretary. Two bosses for education? No wonder we have all this disarray in funding and in education. The second part of your question, you talked about charter schools. I'm a product of parents that cared about my education, and they were actively involved in the education process. We've gotten a long ways away from that when the schools have become the one-stop shop for everything. Charter schools is a new model for that, and I think there's a lot of varieties you're seeing in charter or hybrid models in providing charter schools, where you're getting them to think outside the box. I know in all the different communities there are different hybrids available, and I think we should fully expand on every one of them. Parents want to have a full say in their education. I've heard from a lot of parents that charter schools is something that they'd like more robust involvement from the state. We have to ask folks, who is it that's keeping the charter schools and all those types of hybrid models out of the system? I frankly think the constituents are asking for it. It's time the state allowed more of them to exist. And the ones that are there, for the most part, I think are showing great success.